Hi, we're going to talk about dividing polynomials in this section. I'm going to try to do long division and synthetic division on the same problem. The question is right here in the red box up here. Some abbreviations I'm going to be using are capital D for the dividend, which is a number that is being divided, small d for divisor, which is a number by which we divide, Q is the answer, the quotient, and R is the remainder. Just to quickly review how long division is done with numbers, so I'm going to give you a quick example. If you divide 22 by 4, let's say, we know that 4 times 5 is 20, and then what do we do with them? We subtract 22 minus 20, we get the remainder as 2. So we can write the quotient 22 as we can write the dividend 22 as 5 times 4 plus 2, alright? So the dividend is actually the quotient times the divisor plus the remainder. So this is how you can get the dividend, alright? I'm going to write that over here. The dividend is equal to quotient times divisor plus remainder. Okay, so having said that, let's talk about long division. Okay, so the first step in long division and in synthetic division is the same. It is to set up the dividend and the divisor in the correct way. What I mean by that is, in this question, if you look, you know that the dividend here is x to the 4th power, or 180x minus x to the 4th power. So there's the degree of this dividend is 4. There's a 4th degree term, which is the highest exponent in this polynomial. But we don't have a 3rd degree term or a 2nd degree term. We have a 1st degree term, and we don't have a constant. So what I mean by setup is that when you write it out to divide, you have to provide the missing terms and write it in standard form. So I'm going to start with the highest degree term. This negative goes with this x4, so I'm going to write negative. I need some more space there. So it's going to be negative x to the 4th. I don't have a 3rd degree term, so I'm going to supply it by writing it with a 0, so it doesn't really change the question. 0 x3, x to the 3rd power, 0 x to the 2nd power, since I don't have a 2nd degree term in the question. But I do have a 1st degree term, so I'm going to write it just like that. That's going to be 180x, but I don't have a constant, so that's going to be my 0. So I really didn't change the entire question. I just wrote out the missing terms with the coefficient 0, so I can set it up the correct way to do long division. You have to do the same for the divisor also. If the highest degree for this divisor is 1, after 1, when you count in ascending order, the next number is 0. The degree here is 0, x to the 0th power, right? So that's a constant term. So we don't have to set up the divisor because it's already set up correctly. So we can just write x minus 6 over here. Okay. Now the steps to divide. The first step is the same. I'm going to call this step number 1. This first step is the same for both of them. But the second step, what you have to do is, you divide the first term of the dividend, okay, capital F and capital D, first term of the dividend, which is this, by the first term of the divisor. I'm going to use small d for that. Divisor is this. So in this question, what we have is, we have negative x to the 4th power divided by x, and the answer is negative x to the 3rd power. So that's going to be the first term of our quotient, negative x to the 3rd power. After you do that, you distribute that negative x cubed. You have to distribute it. Distribute means to multiply. We have to distribute it to the divisor. Okay. So negative x to the 3rd times x will be negative x to the 4th. Negative x cubed times negative 6 will be positive 6x cubed. Now, when we talked about the first example, we know that when we divide numbers, what do we do next? We subtract them, right? So how do you subtract polynomials here? We change this negative x to the fourth to positive, and we change this positive to a negative sign. So we change this positive to a negative sign. That's how you subtract polynomials. Change the sign and add them. So negative x4 and positive x4 will cancel. Oh, I did not write the fourth. So subtract. What I mean by subtract is to change the sign of the whatever we write here. Change the sign of both of them and add, so that these first terms will cancel off, and we can bring down the next term over there. 0 minus 6x cubed is negative 6x to the third power, and you bring down the next term, plus 0x to the second power. Now all we have to do is keep, number 5, I can say bring down a term, bring down the next term, and then you repeat this process, the same process over and over again. So what we have to do is, we have to divide. The first term of the dividend becomes this now, negative 6x cubed. So negative 6x cubed, divided by the first term of the divisor becomes x still. So we get negative 6x squared. We write that there, negative 6x squared. And then we distribute to the divisor. When you multiply, you get negative 6x squared times x is negative 6x cubed. Negative 6x squared times negative 6 will be positive 36x to the second power. And then subtract by changing the sign and adding. So this becomes positive, this becomes negative. So when you add, they cancel. We get negative 36x squared. Bring down a term which will be positive 180x. And then we are going to repeat this process all over again. Okay, so now the new dividend becomes negative 36x to the second power divided by x, negative 36x, that's negative 36x. So we get negative 36x, and then we have to distribute in. We get negative 36x squared, and negative 36 times negative 6 becomes positive 216x, positive 216x, and then we subtract them by changing the sign. So this becomes positive, this becomes negative, and then these cancel, and this when you add them you get negative 36x, and then you bring down the 0. Call it a positive or negative 0, doesn't really matter. It's not going to change anything. So now repeat this process again. Now we have negative 36x divided by x. We get negative 36. Negative 36. Go ahead and distribute. We get negative 36x plus 216. So then we change the sign. This becomes positive. This becomes negative. We get negative 216 as the remainder. Alright, so if you look at these steps over here, I'm going to have to, if you can write it down, that would be great, because I'm going to have to erase it because it's on the synthetic side of the page. Okay, so here, another conclusion I can make about these are that x minus 6 is not a factor of the dividend of the question, because I do not get a remainder at 0. So synthetic, the setup step is the same. In synthetic, the setup is the same, but I would not need the variables here. I only need the coefficients. I would set it up like this with the missing terms provided, and then I would write the coefficients separated, spaced out like that equally. 80 and 0. Fourth degree term, third degree, second degree coefficient, first degree coefficient, and the constant, which is the coefficient itself. And then you write a big L-shaped line like that. And then this is the factor. X minus 6 is the factor that we are checking to see, or the divisor, or the factor, right? The divisor in the form of a factor, right? This divisor in the form of a factor. So we know that if negative 6 is a factor, the solution is going to be positive 6. So that's the one thing you have to remember. You have to put positive 6 here on the side. You're using positive 6. Whatever is coming here, the opposite of that comes over there. So if this was positive 6, this would be negative 6. So that's one thing you have to remember in synthetic. Use the opposite sign. And then you have to remember two operations. When you are going to look at the numbers like this straight down, the operation is going to be addition. When you're going to look at the numbers sideways, the operation is going to be multiplication. What I mean by that is the first number here, there's no number here, so I'm going to look at this straight down, so we have to do addition. Negative 1 and 0 is negative 1. Sideways, negative 1 times 6 like this is sideways. When I go sideways, I times, and I write the answer here, negative 6. When I go straight, I add, 0 minus 6 is minus 6. When I go sideways, I multiply, so negative 6 times 6 is negative 36. Straight is add, negative 36. Sideways is multiply, negative 216. Straight is add, negative 36. Sideways is multiply, negative 216. Straight is add, negative 216. So after you write like that, you're going to call the last number as your remainder. And from here, in an increasing order, in an ascending order, I'm going to call this as the constant, the number part. This is your x, this is your x square, this is your x cube. Okay. So let me write out, this is going to be your quotient. Your quotient is going to be x cubed with the negative 1. Negative 1x cubed, negative 6x with the sign, negative 6 with the x square, negative 36 with the x, and negative 36 is just going to be your number part. So if you compare it with this, we just didn't write the 1 over there. Even if you write the 1 or not, it's the same, you know that. So you know that you get the same quotients and you get the same remainder. Okay. So once you get used to this, synthetic might be an easy way to do it. But right now I'm only explaining where the divisor is of the form x plus or minus a, and the coefficient of this x is 1. Okay, we have to be careful that this coefficient is 1. If this is some other number like 2x minus 6, this is not the way to do it. So that is another lesson. I'm not going to talk about that here. Now, one interesting thing about this, where factor theorem comes into place, if you try to find f of 6, the value of this function at 6, okay, in here, you know your f of x is 180x minus x to the 4th power. So instead of x, I'm going to plug in 6. So 180 times 6 minus 6 to the 4th power. So when you do that, what you get is 1080 when you multiply that minus 1000. You can use your calculator, 1296. So when you subtract them, you get your answer as negative 216. So if you notice, we know that this is the remainder that we get, right? So when you evaluate a function at that number, the answer that you get is equal to the remainder when you divide it by that number. Okay, so that's what remainder theorem says. And factor theorem says that if this number, when you evaluate a function at a given number, if you get that answer was 0, if this was 0 instead of 216, then x minus 6 is a factor of the dividend. That's what factor theorem says. And remainder theorem says that when you evaluate a function at a number, the answer that you get is the remainder when you divide the dividend by that divisor. Just repeat these steps, play this again, and listen to this again if I went too fast. Good luck.